You were like, market making fart coin is my future.
It's all I want to do. How close is your local?
I think 2-minute walk. But if you want to go to a nicer pub, in yards, in fathoms.
You can go meters if you want to be European about it.
Very Euro speak. I don't know, 200 yards?
Oh, so closer than mine then. All right, this is the local, named after great British pubs and social clubs where conversation like this nonsense we're talking happens. I'm Tim. I'm currently the CEO of Low-Tech, a firm that's building capital markets infrastructure and trading functions within crypto. And we're here to talk about all things crypto markets, digital technology, and we will divert off into many different things, I think.
About how close our local pub is.
Yeah, who are you?
Yeah, I'm Marcus. I'm the CTO of Low-Tech.
Had to think.
Well, we've got a very flat hierarchy,
Yes,
you know.
exactly.
I mean, and I feel like, these titles, but I guess...
And we're in a world where we don't do labels anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We're in a post-label
Post-label world.
But I generally lead the tech effort. Which feels, I don't like saying stuff like that because it kind of feels like it deprecates the amazing work that all of our engineers do.
That's fair.
But, somebody's got to do it.
Things flow through you. You are like the hub, and they are all the spokes doing the hardcore engineering work.
Fair enough. Thank you. I'll take that on chin.
And how did you get into crypto? Or how did you get into...
Do you want the abridged version?
Yeah.
I think I probably punted shitcoins in 2017.
Did shitcoins exist then?
Yeah. Do you not
what?
remember? I was in Rayblocks, which has recently branded as Nano, which was... I got really into it because it was a directed acyclic graph.
So you actually read the white papers and stuff?
Sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of was like, this is cool, right? Because it was a different way of... Well, we don't get too technical, but, you could think of it as like a database that blockchain's been sharing. And so it's a different way of structuring the database with this like graph way of doing it. And it was meant to be a payments thing. And I bought it at 25 cents and I sold it at $3. Then I bought it at $9 and sold it for 1 cent.
Yay! That's the punchline I was after.
Yeah. So I kind of got into it then, but very loosely.
How much were you cursing between $3 and $9 as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, classic. Just
Hindsight.
Yeah. Just trading. But yeah, I kind of got into it then, and then a bit more seriously in 2020, DeFi summer.
Yeah.
Learned how to do smart contracts. Had some fun on chain, and then.
And was that because you were interested, continued to be interested in the space, or you were curious about the smart contract?
I find the how would you phrase it? Sort of decentralized compute, permissionless compute, the most compelling.
That feels to me like that's the most futuristic.
Yeah.
If you think about what sci-fi world looks like in 200 years, it feels like compute's happening everywhere.
Yeah,
around
exactly.
You,
yeah, and can happen asynchronous because as we become more spacefaring and the speed of light becomes a real thing. Having this decentralized asynchronous compute is going to be actually quite important.
Yeah.
When the latency start being measured in a bit more than milliseconds.
Yeah, for me that was the kind of aha moment in terms of decentralized compute. It was like, this is what future.
But you got into it earlier, right?
Yeah, I was exposed to it by some developers that I was working with at a hedge fund who were they were riding huge booms during 2017 ICO period, and I was running a trading desk then, and they were constantly distracted whilst they should have been doing work that I was asking them to do. It's like, please code this, and they're like, look at the price of my tulip coin or whatever.
I actually quit a job. When we started working together, I'd quit that job before. Well, of course, having fun on chain and stuff, but I quit that job because I'd asked my PM. Yeah. So I'm a quant by background, right? I'm a PhD in maths and gone off and done research and all sorts of stuff. But I was doing tradfi, mid-frequency research then, and I was like, I want to get into, I was watching a DeFi summer stuff. I was like, I want to get into this. I want to there's loads of shit that we can do here. And then my PM was like, don't want to get into it. So that's why I
shut it down.
Yeah. That's why I was like, right,
bye.
Yeah, I'm going to go and do something else.
So
you were the PM.
I was kind of like,
you were the bad guy.
I mean, it was a loose enough place that we were kind of fine with it. And they actually reported up into the what was the head of tech or CTO there, and so he was kind of fine with it as well. And but they were very interested in it and talking about it a lot. And so I kind of poked my head into it, and then it was like, for me, it was like, okay, I think this is like a nonsense bubble, but what is the underlying technology? And so, as you know, you've heard me say this on calls like lots of times. And then, good aside, down the camera.
I'm it's all this quant stuff is like wasted on me, and actually I should just be
on the stage.
Yeah.
For me, it was like, okay, how does it work? Like, I want to peel back the layers of the technology.
Yeah.
And so I built.
And are you like a kinesthetic learner? Like, you couldn't get that from the white paper. You have to get the code and start running
long enough for you to, I will not be able to sit there and read maths and understand it in the way that you can. But if I have a lever I can pull here, and if I can code something up in Python, or I can put it in a spreadsheet and I can see how things move, then somehow an intuition happens. And so,
have you done any sort of like cost benefit analysis of like, hey, the electricity cost is X?
A little bit, yeah. And to the point where I ruled out the fact that it was ever going to be profitable in the UK.
Right.
And so I started, and I started exploring ways that I could get cheaper electricity.
Did I ever tell you about the story when I went to Iceland in 2012?
No.
So I went to Iceland in 2012 with my then girlfriend.
Yeah.
And we stayed at this hostel, the Blue Hostel or something.
What was the purpose of the trip?
Travel. Just purely go and have a look at Iceland. Long story. We were going over to America, and it was cheaper to fly via Iceland.
Okay.
And we were like, let's.
You weren't exploring thermo power or anything.
Well, actually, funny you should say that.
I can see where this is going.
Yeah. So I'm in the hostel, and it's coming to like the end of the 3-day stay, and I'm like stood on the floor. This is before I had slippers, because I was a younger man then, 2012, so I didn't have any slippers. And I was like, you got underfloor heating in here?
Yeah.
And he's like, funny you should say. I'm actually mining Bitcoin underneath the floor of the hostel, because basically they have free electricity. Yeah. And I paid for the hostel in Bitcoin.
Nice.
In 2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because I'd read the paper in 2010, and I'd mined some Bitcoins on an old Sony Vaio laptop. I came out of my PhD being like, I don't want to do academia. I did maths undergrad, and I kind of didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And then I got offered to do a PhD, and I was like, this is kind of put off growing up for 3 years, going like noodle around. And it was like my subject that I was good at. It was fluid mechanics, and kind of just like noodled around for 3 years, sort of writing papers and learning how to do research at a high level.
Right. So the structure of how a research process happens.
Because that's what you're training to do with a PhD, right? You're
going to go on and do it lots across your academic career.
You kind of learn the thing that you learn, aside from lots about your subject, and for me, then a lot about coding, because I was doing
simulations.
I was doing computational fluid dynamics, but I was coming from a background of like fluid dynamics on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So like learned loads from like the people who were running the supercomputer in Cambridge and like all this kind of stuff. So that's where I kind of got my computing skills. I'd always been, been able to write code and whatnot, and always been a bit of a nerd for that. But that's where I kind of really honed like, okay, like we're going to do some high performance computing. Which I think is reasonably relevant.
You don't strike me as a bedroom nerd, though, like someone who would classically just go, I've got a chance to go out with my mates, or I'm going to go and code for a
Can
while.
do both.
Yeah. Well, there's no yeah.
Yeah, I kind of did both.
But the archetypal view of a nerd is like someone who has no social life and social skills.
I don't know if that's true.
It is true.
I think that was like what the media in the 90s would have portrayed. But I don't think that's true.
It's a nice little neg.
The computer scientists were a bit like that.
Yeah.
But the mathematicians were quite gregarious, and I've always said that mathematics is a social sport.
Why?
It's
because you need to talk about. Ideas.
You talk about. It's always talking about the stuff. Now I remember, like when we would just talk up on the whiteboard problems. Yeah. It was very much like, because that idea of like it's rubber ducking. I think is probably what the equivalent term would be. But kind of rubber ducking and all this kind of stuff. Kind of didn't really think about career until kind of coming to the end of the PhD, and I was like, I kind of love doing computers and thinking about models, and but I don't really like the idea of plugging away and doing this for very
40
little
years.
money.
Yeah.
And like I didn't have a love. I maybe going back to your point, I've got other interests, so I didn't have a love of fluid mechanics to the point where I was looking at some of my peers and been like, oh my god, you guys really love this.
Yeah.
you really love this, and I kind of like doing other stuff. And so I kind of like Google, what can I get paid well for doing maths?
Yeah.
Oh, quant finance. Okay.
This is the thing.
This is the thing. So you spend 6 months learning about it, teach yourself some stuff, which is the great thing, the research thing that you've learned, which is why they like PhDs, right? Because like you can go and look at a field and go,
here's this not well-defined problem that you actually need to
do, yeah. And so that's kind of like how I left and got into it, and then got my first job. I actually had a opportunity to go. I could have gone into machine learning. Actually, I got an offer to go and do machine learning stuff, and I decided to go for
the different paths that would have happened.
I could have been, staff engineer at Meta. I mean, can we go back that far in time? Your career steps?
They were still writing with...
Was it papyrus?
Papyrus and scratching things on rocks.
Yeah, hieroglyphics.
At the beginning of my career, pretty much.
Did it start with a 19?
My career?
Yeah. Or did it start with a 20?
It would...
Excluding university.
There's a world in which if I'd gone the standard route of a UK route of A-levels straight to university, straight to a job, my career, if I'd been lucky enough to have that progression, would have been a 9199 starting.
Oh, such a good year, though.
Yeah.
It was a good day. Halcyon days.
It's halcyon days. It's a good time to be in and around London. Lots of good stuff going on.
Yeah.
But because of all the various things that I chucked in the way of trying to get a job, like extra university and
trying to be a professional golfer,
all of that stuff meant that my career didn't start until... I didn't start job till I was 25, I don't think. So.
Neither did I.
Yeah, but you got a doctorate. You're a PhD. It's like different. You're like...
Yeah, but I mean...
Got something I could...
It's actually hung above my toilet in my bathroom. Okay. Just so if anybody comes round for dinner in the house, and they get reminded when they go for a wee.
So they can be suitably deferential when they come out of the loo.
Funnily enough, people aren't. No. I don't know why.
So yeah, I started at a bank, which was, as I said, one of the 5 sort of standard careers that you would do post-university.
Given your weird... I don't know if I'm giving too much citizenship information away, but is there a reason why you went to a Canadian bank, given your... Did that give you an edge?
Yeah, probably. I aced the maths test there. I know that. Primarily because the 3 other banks that I'd interviewed for had exactly the same maths test, and I'd done it like the previous weeks.
Okay.
And you got feedback immediately as to what you got right and what got wrong. So it's just...
Well, was it like actual maths, or was it like...
No, it was fast thinking maths.
Oh, like multiply numbers together sort of thing?
Yeah, you've got like 5 minutes to do this 50 questions.
Absolutely zero predictive power on the...
yes. But it's the kind of thing that trading desks used to like to... Or they still like to hire
like
for
back when it was done with the slide rule.
Yeah, exactly. And weight scales and abacuses. You've got to be able to move those beads quite quickly.
It reminds me of that story, and it's probably not one for the intro podcast, about the... they've been looking for low latency trading for a very long time, and the system of beacons that they set up
across the south of the
France.
country.
It was in France.
Okay.
So
we've got beacons in this country as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the same, they were used for military aspect.
Right.
And then somebody was like, well, wait a minute, can I transfer information from Paris? I think it was to Lyon.
Okay.
So about the stock market
prices of trade.
Yeah, so they could transfer them faster than the whole system.
I might be getting this completely wrong, but my understanding is of how the telegraph system and a lot of the early electronic communication system in the States was by people being keen to get information from one exchange or marketplace to another, and they would privately fund these new telegraph systems to be able to trade.
Yeah.
It's no different, right?
The Flash Gentleman.
Exactly. Yeah, so I worked for a bank for 10 years doing...
But this was back before banking was neutered, or around about that time?
So we had prop function. We had proprietary trading on our desk.
GFC in your...
So I still was 2002, so I had a good 5 or 6 year run before that happened.
Did you see through the crash at the bank then?
Yeah, which was an amazing... In hindsight, an amazing learning experience. People fell by the wayside through stress. We literally lost people off the desk who just... they were being asked to do extraordinary things in terms of covering overnight shifts during times that were unprecedented. Right? I didn't really understand. I don't really grokked the magnitude of what was going on because I didn't have the context.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything, isn't it? Like you get so much more with time and distance away from a period. You get so much more understanding about the genuine, real size of it and the shake of it.
Yeah, and when you get to my advanced stage, just you appreciate that more. Like that comes up in all sorts of different ways.
I also think there's a bit of a weird thing where because volatility kind of has this, it's not like fixed in size through time.
Yeah.
Heteroscedasticity, I think would be the word that if you wanted to be technical. And so, like, we get these big vol events now. I think what was the one the other week where it's like it's the biggest down move since COVID, and the down move before that was like in the GFC, and but it doesn't feel like that kind of magnitude now.
No.
Like it doesn't feel like that world ending now with Trump tariffs and stuff. It feels like
and it was the same even pre-crisis. That was the same because I remember that Nat Gas fund Amaranth. Do you remember? Blew up, and it was like in my short career to date, it was the biggest news, and these people were talking. These numbers are so huge. How can something of this magnitude happen? And it was single-digit billions from what I remember. So like huge amount of value that was being erased. But compared to then what happened in the GFC, it was like just this little blip. And so I think my only reference point when the GFC happened was probably anecdotal memories and stories about the 1987 crash in the UK, which I was...
But the old the George Soros...
was that
we were trying to...
No, because that was 90... That was
what was
breaking the pound.
Was that breaking the pound? Was that not 87?
No, I think that was 90... I have to fact check, but I think that was like 92.
Yeah, probably was, because it would have been pre-Maastricht Treaty and... Yeah, anyway, digress.
10 years at a bank. Doing exotic options, but working with really good engineers and building a system.
Is that where you learned to code?
I taught myself to code there,
You can tell.
VBA.
I also taught myself to code.
Yeah. Not VBA.
Not No, I think VBA was the language of my GCSE. I'm just too old for Python.
If it's school, it would have been,
yeah. But Python at university.
Yeah. So I remember going to university and I didn't know how spreadsheets worked. And then when I joined the bank, almost everything's spreadsheet based, which sits on top of VBA. So it's like if I want to make the spreadsheet do something, it can't do.
We talked about this the other day. You record the macro and then look at the code.
Work out what it's doing and then see all these strange things. And I found that interesting. And I'd kind of avoided computers up to that point. And then crisis happened. Our business survived very well through that period. We were shut down as they did a moratorium on everything across the bank to see where risk was. And during that period, we went in, managed risk, but weren't allowed to do any new business for a while, like for a serious amount of time, like 2 years.
Wow.
And that just led to the ability to explore lots of different stuff. Like I started coding websites in my spare time.
Is this when you had your food blog?
Yeah, food blogs, all this sort of stuff. Like just interested in how the internet works and how it sticks together. And then the business started to ramp up again. We carried on doing quite well, but a learning curve had gone, and so then I moved over to a hedge fund and helped them build trading systems.
But you'd been doing the options already, right? You kind of learned the options trade because that's your real background, isn't it? It's options
10 years as an options trader, and at the exotic end as well.
So you didn't get into Delta One, as they would call it, until because you were doing options at Fulcrum.
Options at Fulcrum, but a lot of other stuff as well. Multi-asset Delta One.
Oh, so you got into Delta One at Fulcrum?
Yeah, so we had systematic trend, which was all Delta One. They tried to do it in options, but it doesn't really carry over that well. And that's where the team that I was working with began to expose me to crypto.
And we go back to the start, where
exactly.
that's when you started mining.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, so the career progression was a lot of new stuff, going from a large bank institution to a smaller business where you have to take on more responsibility. So lots of learning there, which was great. And then when that learning began to plateau, I was like, okay, well, how do I want to move on career-wise? And cryptocurrency and digital and trading.
You're like, market making Fartcoin is my future.
It's all I want to do. But for me, the confluence of all these different interests, like technology and trading, and
I think I said it yesterday. I think it's the funnest market
in a world that's full of these podcasts. Or what are we going to bring in this podcast that we think is a bit fresher and different, other than the two of us just talking nonsense, which we've obviously demonstrated we can do for a long time.
I think probably being a practitioner, having some skin in the game.
Every week I will search HFT crypto in Spotify and try and find new podcasts, which is where a lot of the links in the podcast thing comes from. So I mean, there is a lack of it, and there's lots of reasons as to why there's a lack of it, because people don't go on podcasts and talk about alpha and little niches that they're exploiting because they're busy finding them and exploiting them.
Tell me you don't have any alpha.
Yes,
by starting a podcast. Fuck.
No. That was the moment they realised. So if you've stuck with us and you like what you're hearing, we're going to be doing a series of these. So please drop us a like, a follow. Let us know anything that you'd like us to cover, comments wise.
Like and subscribe.
I
think that's what they would say on the YouTube.
Smash.
No, that's very old school.
Oh. Again. Okay.